Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents with your host, Nicole Romito. Nicole, I've never told you this before. I love saying your name. I don't know why. Nicole Romito.
Great. Well, you haven't said that before, and I appreciate it. I think it's a fun name, too. So How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. I know that you've got another great guest on the show today. Who did you bring on?
Yes, joining me today is Laura Adams, who is the Chief HR Officer for Jones Lang LaSalle. And I'm very excited for our conversation today as we want to highlight successful women as it is Women's History Month.
I love it. And just for the listeners, if you're just joining us, Nicole's already done a few podcasts based on this as far as Women's History Month. And it's been fantastic. It's been fun. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to talk about today.
Great. So first of all, welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Laura, you joined JLL back in 2004, and at that time, you thought it would be a single year of real estate experience. You're now laughing about 19 years later. During your time at JLL, Laura has held a range of leadership positions, building up her strategic partnership experience by serving just about every business line in the company, from corporate solutions to capital markets to JLL Technologies. Laura became CHRO in 2022, and although she is still on a learning journey, those past experiences working with all the various and unique businesses in JLL have been invaluable in her current role. Laura, as we were prepping for this episode today, you mentioned that as a young mom, your daughter often asks, what pushed you to get where you are today? Could you share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Sure. I had my daughter at a relatively young age. I had not finished college yet. And so I was a single mom. And it was curious as she grew older, she kept saying, what was it that really made you push yourself so far ahead in your career? And I think there were a couple things that really stood out when I reflected on that question. The first is at the time when she was born, I was working at the University of Michigan and was fortunate enough to work in the business school there. And I was exposed to just some really incredibly smart faculty and staff and students that challenged me and helped me learn and grow. And it made me realize I needed to focus on my education. And so I took night classes at Eastern Michigan University, realizing education was going to be, and continual learning was going to be the only way to advance in this world. And then I think the second driver for me was I was going to prove people wrong. There was a lot of negative stereotypes of single moms, and I just didn't want to be that statistic. And so that drive really helped me keep going during tough times.
I love that. I love that you're, like you said, you want to either beat the statistic or start to change it with your personal experience and your personal drive. And just what a great role model. I think the best role models and the ones I know I choose are the ones who show me by doing, because it's just so much more impactful. And then you can really say, hey, I mean, in your instance, your daughter's like, hey, mom did it. I can do it too. So that's fantastic. Would you like to share a little bit about, you've worked in many areas in JLL, as I shared in your bio, kind of how you transition from working at a university to going to corporate America, if you will, and certainly a very large and far-reaching organization. How has that, maybe what are some of the opportunities you've encountered? And then I'm sure there's also challenges that come along with that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just share a little bit of my journey and how I got here. As you said, I was working at the University of Michigan. I went to school and got my degree. And then I was recruited by one of the consulting firms, and it was a niche consulting firm at the time, blending business strategy and technology during the whole .com rise. And they were recruiting MBAs, but they were looking for someone to come in and help with their campus recruiting. And so I went to this organization. It was a bit of a risk at the time for me. I had never moved away from growing up in Michigan. And so I was coming to Chicago. But what I found there is it really became about the people and the talent of that organization. I was surrounded again with really incredibly intelligent, hardworking, and ambitious people. But most important to me was that the culture was just around being very nice and focusing on teamwork and collaboration and embracing these new ideas. The company grew. I think I was employee 150. We grew to 2,400 globally in the time that I was there. And as you can imagine, with companies going through that kind of growth and coming from a startup, things just started to change. And so I decided it was time to leave. And I think it's really critical for women in particular when you're in an organization that doesn't align with what you aspire, whether that's in the values or in the work, that you make that decision and decide to leave and move on. And for me, it was a little bit of both. The values were changing in the organization, but also the work was changing, and I realized I would benefit from going to a larger company. And so I went on the opposite end of a startup and to a bank that was 50,000 employees at the time.
Wow.
And
yeah. That is a big difference.
It was a big difference.
I grew up in banking. So yeah, that is the opposite end of the spectrum.
And it was less sort of innovative and creative. And so, I went there. It was this big company. It was very structured as it needed to be, right? It was in financial services. But that creativity and that innovative mindset sort of didn't work out for me. And then I decided to move back to Chicago. I was out in Los Angeles at the time, and I found JLL. And as you said in the beginning, I was coming here for a year. I really had no interest in commercial real estate. I was pretty naive to the scale, the economic drivers, and the impact it could have on the world. And again, found a place that was really smart people, but also had the culture that aligned to me. And when I think about our organization today and the impact it has on the world, and you think about in commercial real estate, 90% of the population is impacted by this every day. And so that's a huge part of me wanting to stay here. And then over the 19 years, I've just continued to learn and grow and be curious. I went back to school and got an MBA here, and then just continued to take on new responsibilities. And it's just been an incredible journey.
I love it. And I agree. I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is commercial real estate is such a broad label, if you will. And as you found out, and I know in having conversations with you, you've educated me just how much of a meaningful impact it does have on everyone's lives, regardless if you're in the industry or not. What are some of the culture, like the values or traits that you like and embrace within the culture at JLL? And, or I guess I should say, you also try to set and have the company embrace, since you're one of the people in HR, kind of getting to set the tone, if you will, for that.
Yeah, our core values that we tout globally are quite simple. It's really about teamwork, excellence, and ethics, which are core and foundational to who we are. And in an organization that's dominated by a sales workforce, that whole teamwork aspect is really key for us. And it ties into how do we bring together diverse mindsets to help solution for our clients in a different way. So that is very, very important to me. But I also think that our organization feels an obligation to make the world a better place. And when I think about our sustainability agenda and reducing the carbon footprint, not only for ourselves, but for our client, and the impact that that will have on the world is really quite huge. And then finally, if you think about commercial real estate really being where people go to work and how they live their lives and what that experience is like in the surroundings of a space, it can have a significant impact on people in their jobs and roles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spend such a large portion of our lives, both at work and with the people we work with. I mean, I know we've seen a big change over the last few years due to the pandemic, where some people and companies have gone fully remote. I think I've seen a lot more of where it's been some type of hybrid approach. Any trends or things things that you'd like to comment on how JLL is adjusting or flexing as we go forward in kind of a more of a hybrid world?
Yeah, I definitely think hybrid is here to stay, but you're also starting to see the more recent trend where organizations are realizing the value and the power of bringing people together. And there was a statistic recently around the number of patents that had been released have dropped significantly from the pandemic. And you could theorize that part of that is because people aren't coming together to innovate and create as much. And that's really what the office space allowed. So I think, like I said, I think the talent shortage that exists today is going to support a hybrid workforce. And it's a position that we take within even with our own workforce, is creating that flexibility so we can draw the talent. But I wouldn't want to lose sight of what bringing together people can be and working together really adds. We're humans, right? We want to interact with one another.
Yes.
And be around people. And most of us find a lot of energy through that.
I agree. And regardless of what industry you're working in, just being able to build the relationships, as you said, we're all human. And so you do want to get to know your colleagues as human beings as well, because I think it just helps you be that much better at your job.
Exactly.
And we agree too at Private Vista, when we returned from the pandemic, we adopted a hybrid model as well. And we have found it certainly useful with our employees being more satisfied. I think they feel that they're trusted, that we know they're going to get their work done regardless of where they are. And then, as you mentioned too, it certainly has been helpful as we're recruiting and doing additional hiring. Being in a service industry, I think it's almost expected that you have to have some level of flexibility of when and where people are doing their work.
Right. I also think about if you think about more and more of the roles in companies are going to be knowledge-based roles. And where do you gain that knowledge is largely from working with your coworkers.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, as we both highlighted hiring, I can't imagine coming into a new company and being 100% remote. I think it'd be so much more difficult to get onboarded, to get to know your colleagues, build those relationships. And I see it with a lot of our younger advisors too, when we're in the office, if they hear people, talking about a case or, hey, here's how we're going to handle this potential client situation or the new tax law, it's a lot easier to kind of jump in and say, hey, I'm interested in learning that too. Or, oh, I read an article about it and here's how I'm approaching it. Right. So kind of the talk around the water cooler, if you will, or the coffee cup, right?
Yeah. Well, and the whole premise of adult learning is that you end up learning from one another. And so it's kind of funny that we think education, and even if you go back to schools where it's so important for students to come together, why wouldn't that permeate itself through the workforce too?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially too, I do think two heads are better than one. So you can have the same knowledge, but maybe you had a different life experience or you had a different strategy for your particular client and things like that. So you're right. You absolutely continue to learn. And even though we have the book knowledge and things like that, I think you and I have both lived enough life to know you do get some curveballs thrown at you. So it's
like a pandemic.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure. Yes, I do not envy your role having to navigate a large corporation and tens of thousands of employees looking to you to be like, how are we going to do this? What's next?
Right.
So why don't we maybe kind of pivot to that? And it doesn't have to be directly related to the pandemic, but what are some key skills that, you look for as you're developing the leadership team, as you're developing in yourself, or, you've noticed like you either had the skills? What are some of the key ones that leaders need to have when you're, looking to motivate your team, have people looking to grow and looking forward? But then, as you mentioned as well, it's a pretty tight labor market. So how are you retaining people, keeping them content at the company, but again, allowing them to say, hey, there's growth for you as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things the pandemic did do for us was really challenged how what are the leadership traits that a workforce is looking for? And it became more about how do you show empathy and how do you recognize individuals as a whole person, not just what they are at work, and doing that in a way that demonstrates high care. I think for any leader, it's really important to create a clear and compelling vision, get people aligned to a purpose, but how you engage those individuals and all of their skill sets behind that purpose and vision is really what true leadership is about. I think one of my favorite stories actually happened a long time ago, and I was reminded of it as I was reading the book, The CEO Test, and it talked about a time when President Kennedy went to visit the NASA Space Center in 1962, and he noticed a janitor carrying a broom, and he interrupted his tour and walked over and introduced himself to the man and asked him, what was he doing? And the janitor responded, "I'm helping put a man on the moon, Mr. President." And I just thought,
oh, love that.
What that story tells is just, it got everyone. He presented a vision of putting a man on the moon to the point that everyone, the janitor included, was rallying behind that purpose and that vision and recognized their role in it and how they could contribute to it. And then that he would take the time to step aside and introduce himself on this tour just showed great employee care and empathy. So I think that's just really, really key, not to forget that we are all humans, and how you inspire and engage people is really quite what leadership is all about.
Absolutely. I think as humans, deep down or at our core, each of us just wants to be seen and acknowledged. I don't know about you. I can't tell you how many times, whether I, get into an Uber or if I'm, getting lunch and I'm checking out, just asking someone, looking them in the eye and saying, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And my friends always tease me because if we're out to eat, I always ask whoever is serving us, what's your name? And then make sure to use it throughout the meal. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's just, they're human beings. They're doing their job. But you want to acknowledge them and say, "I see you, and, and I appreciate you."
Yeah, it's one of the things. And I actually read an article during all of the social unrest a couple of years ago, race related in the US here. And this woman wrote this article. She was working in the technology industry. And, you go through your life and you say, "How are you doing?" And everybody's fine. "I'm good." And she said her manager did the most incredible thing. And she, to the point that she wrote this editorial, and she said, the manager stopped and said, "No, how are you really doing?" And she repeated again. She said, "I'm fine. I'm doing my job. I'm fine." And she kept pushing and saying, "No, with everything going on in the world, how are you dealing with all of this?" And it, again, showed that care and concern for the individual. And it was something she just was really touched by and respected and acknowledged. So you can't lose sight of the human touch around really inspiring and drawing out the best in people.
Yeah, I agree. I would say too, you mentioned in that example, both of the people are women. How, as women, as leaders in both of our respective companies and kind of at large, what are, some of the traits you mentioned and the core values at JLL: collaboration, ethics, empathy. We've just both highlighted, looking at your colleague or your teammate as a human, as a person. How can we as women, I would say, highlight and utilize? I know we're all individuals, so I don't want to broad brush or stereotype, but if you already have those skills, and I think as many of the women I know we do innately have those, how do you leverage using them in the best way to, for yourself in the workplace, and then also to encourage and, get your team to grow?
Yeah, I think you're spot on that some of these leadership traits are actually more natural in women, to sort of show that care and nurturing. And so I would say really draw that out as you advance in leadership as well. I think a couple things I would encourage women as they think about their careers is to not diminish themselves and their contributions. Yeah, yes. I saw this presentation with two colleagues that they were presenting, and one was a male and one was a female. And she opened the session, which I thought, great. I'm glad that she's owning this and really driving this versus letting, her male colleague open up. But she opened it and she immediately diminished herself by introducing her male colleague as the mastermind behind the presentation. And she was just the cheerleader.
Right.
And I just worry about, and I know she didn't mean it. It was intended to be humorous, but we really have to move away from that stereotype of that we are and not worry too much about being bossy or standing up for what we believe in, because I think we have a lot of value to add to corporations.
I agree. I know with some of my female colleagues as well, I'm always telling them, be big, take up space, don't apologize unnecessarily.
Yes.
That's probably my number one pet peeve. And I call them on it. I pull them aside individually and say, hey, I'm doing this because I care about you and I want you to come into the meeting or the room from a place of power and strength. So please, I'm coming from a place of love and I want to keep calling you on it because it's a habit you're probably not even aware of.
Yeah. And I think you're really right. Women don't really realize, and I love you say sort of make space in the room and enlarge yourself. I was recently, when I just got promoted, I was at an executive meeting and we were sitting around the table and I was towards the end and the guy who I work with was sitting next to me, but because the screen was in front facing the other way, he kept his back to me the whole time. So I got up in the middle of the meeting and moved because I didn't want to be behind his back. And I think women need to be more and more aware of the subtleties. Like you say, we have a tendency to apologize more than men do. And it just discredits us. So being mindful of those things and having a greater presence is so key.
Agree. I mean, like you said, your actions matter. So you got up and moved. I think our words matter, not apologizing or, just being strong with, I know one thing I read is instead of saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm late, whether it's for a meeting or a call, simply flip it and say, thank you for waiting. Right.
Yeah,
so I had read a couple articles on this and it's so simple, but you do need to keep it top of mind. But I also think too, to have people who are your peers and, or, if they're your team leaders or the division leaders or, partners at company, that also too, we're reminding people because it's long ingrained habits that we're trying to reset.
Hey, pardon the interruption. I know you are listening to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Ramito, and we're happy you're here. If you have any questions, please head over to myprivatevista.com or the show notes to find out how to reach us. We'd love to hear from you.
How about too, I would say some of the things I think too that a lot of the articles, and this is another pet peeve of mine, is the whole like work-life balance.
They don't ask men that question.
No, they don't. Right. Yeah. I was just reading an article too about the daddy caucus in Congress. Oh, I can't remember who it was, but he like strapped his baby into him when he was voting on something. And, there's all this press and all this things like that. And women are like, I've been doing this, we've been doing this for hundreds of years. And there's no articles or Instagram accounts on us, right? It's just always been done that way. But yeah, I think it's like, I think you and I are in line. I don't know. I don't believe in the whole like work-life balance. I think there's room for both work and a personal life, but I'm not sure that it's possible or even if you'd want it to be to a 50-50. But what are some of the things that you've personally done and then maybe you coach with either, colleagues or friends or things like that? How do you get past the guilt or let it go?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for women. And I don't know that I'm great about it, but when you're balancing raising children, managing a home life, and then managing a career that, as you say, is very important to women these days and trying to have it all and still, even though there are men that are playing a bigger role, a lot of the work and home life still sits with the women in their families. I think what I've learned, and there was an article about this, is the most successful women learn how to outsource aspects of their life. I mean, part of the reason why I enjoy working with Private Vista is you guys came to me through a referral and really helped start to support me in what I needed from a financial planning perspective. And, frankly, I didn't have the time when I was stepping into this role, and nor did I really have the interest. And so your team has come in to support me. It makes me feel much more confident about my financial future. And so it's things like that of really taking aspects of your life and saying, what can I outsource and what either brings me joy, or what are the things that I like to do so I can create that capacity by letting those things go and getting help from others.
I love that. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your kind words about our firm. We appreciate it. But you're not unique in our client base. Our clients are all, busy, both with successful careers and then personal lives, however that looks. So you're absolutely right. And I subscribe to that as well. Obviously, I don't outsource my personal financial planning, but doing things, what do I either enjoy doing or want to learn to do? And then anything else, I 100% agree. Let's outsource it and have the people who they find joy from doing that activity and they're good at it as well. I don't think to be successful or to be a proven, a woman proven at this point in life that you have to be able to do it all yourself.
Right.
And I think it's probably pretty darn hard to get there, to do it all and then to do it well. And I love the word joy, and still find joy in your life. So I love that you use that. And I would say, speaking of that, you and I kind of shared some of the things we do as leaders at our company to help promote ourselves and then also help bring along the other women that are coming along in our industries. But again, we don't need to do it all. Well, I would say we don't want to do it all by ourselves. And please, if you disagree with any of my wording, let me know. But why don't we take maybe a few minutes to talk about how our male colleagues can and have been allies?
Yeah. And I will say I have really been fortunate through my career that I've had several men who have seen the potential and the performance in me to help really become allies and really advocate for me, which is probably the biggest thing that men can do is, and I look at advocating as not only supporting your career, but also being the one who stands up for you when you're not in the room. And so I think men play a big part of helping reshape the workforce, not only in the demographics, but especially at the leadership ranks, of talking about them when they're not in the room, giving them opportunities just like they would anyone else. I've had a couple executives that I've worked with over the years who could see me sort of shying away from, as you said, sort of putting yourself at the table. And they really kind of brought it out and would call me out in meetings and sort of force me to gain that voice throughout the years. And so I think men play a big role in helping women advance in all organizations.
Yeah, I agree. And the statistics show and the studies show that companies benefit both from a cultural perspective, but also from a financial perspective, that they have, whatever you want, higher revenues, higher profitability, higher client or employee satisfaction, that when you have a more diverse leadership team and just people bringing different life experiences and different perspectives to the table.
Yeah, I think if you think about women today, right, we make up 50% of the workforce and really have between 70 and 80% of the consumer spend.
Yes.
So organizations are going to have to start to think about, how do I sell to women in a very different way than in the past? And I think organizations that can really harness that thinking, as you say, collectively, men and women or diverse populations come together to really solve problems and create products that are meaningful, is really what it's all about.
I agree. And it's so much more, right? I think when you've seen certain like big consumer product companies or even some financial services firms, they're like, oh, we'll just like put some pictures of women and we'll just have a pink theme to our marketing material. And that, then now we've tailored it to that audience. So it's certainly so much more than that. And I know I'm always saying, as you pointed out, women, we're over 50% of the population. So we're not a niche. We're over half of the population. And, even though you and I are both leaders in our industry, we've had different life experiences and things, we might have different things that are in order of priority that are important to us. So something that might resonate with you or be like, yes, they get me. I might be like, oh my gosh, did they miss the mark, and vice versa. So, right. I think we're individuals. Yes, we do share a lot of the same qualities and characteristics and things like that. But again, it's not only just putting pink on it. It's figuring out how we think, what's important to us. I know my industry, the financial services industry, continues to struggle with this. Mm-hmm. Women who look at their wealth, they do it very differently than men, and we've seen, even in conversations with you where it's not as important of did I beat the markets or how did my portfolio do? It's more, how am I tracking to my goals and what's important for me and my family and the organizations I care about.
Yeah. And I think financial services, real estate, all of those organizations are having to rethink how they work so that they can draw out the best from their female colleagues, or all colleagues, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So great. Well, why don't we, I think you and I could probably talk about this. We could be here all week. We're clearly knowledgeable about it, being women. And I think we're passionate about it as well. Do we want to wrap up, and do you want to share a few of the things that your company has been doing to support women and the growth in their careers with JLL?
I would be happy to. I'm actually really quite proud of the work and the effort that we've done as an organization. And I'll start with our board of directors is probably one of the most diverse boards that you would see in any Fortune 200 company. But for our employee base, of our top 100 leaders, 25% of them are female. We still have work to go, but for this industry, that's really quite impressive. We have 8 countries in which we generate the majority of our success. And 3 of those 8 countries are led by female CEOs. And that has changed significantly over the last 5 years. So I'm quite proud of that. Over a third of our workforce globally is female. And we continue to invest in organizations and partner with organizations that help continue this agenda around females in the workforce. We are part of the Commercial Real Estate for Women Pledge for Action to support the advancement of women in real estate. We published our 5th gender pay gap report and the 3rd ethnicity pay gap report in the UK, and have launched programs to break down financial barriers for underrepresented populations entering into the real estate, including assisting with student loans so that we can draw in, again, more diverse workforce. And then globally, we have female business networks that we support, where they hold training and webinars, and really just build a organization that's there to support one another.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like you guys have made some great strides, and I have no doubt with you on the executive team that you guys will continue to make even greater strides. I look forward to the day where we're just talking about leadership. Yes. And we don't have to assign any other type of modifier or label to it. It's just what type of skills or, what type of people are good leaders, right?
Right. So, let's hope we see that day.
I was just going to say, I hope you and I see the day. Probably I have more hope that your daughter will see the day. So, but that's okay, as long as the day is coming.
Yes, that's true.
So again, I want to thank you for sharing not only your time, but, some of your personal stories with myself and our listeners. I think that just, again, shows that, we're willing to open up and talk about how we got to where we are today. It's not always a path that's linear and upwards to the right. And, we're all human, and we all have some stumbles or setbacks, but you just got to keep going. So thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I do have a question that I ask all my guests. Oh, sure. Where would you most like to live and why? And you can put it in the context of, if there's no constraints on like you have to be somewhere because of work or family obligations or any financial constraints or anything like that.
Boy, there's a lot of places I would like to live, especially outside of the US, which would be fun to do.
Yes.
But if I had to pick one place, I would say I would be by my daughter. She lives in Los Angeles now. And so I think I would trade the Midwest to be closer to her.
That's great. That is great. And I love that answer.
Thank you.
So great.
All right. This has been fantastic, Laura and Nicole. I do have a couple things real quick. Number one, as a guy, the irony and or stupidity is not lost on me when a guy straps a baby to his body and votes because he's wearing a snuggly, which was invented by a woman in the 70s, a nurse, by the way. And she based it off of a kanga from Africa that she saw over there, which again was also invented by a woman. So let's just put it there. Irony just kills me. But I do have a real question, Laura, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You spoke earlier about kind of that mindset, understanding that people are human beings, and it's a human being that you're looking at. It's not just a number. It's not just a worker, right? And women sometimes struggle when if you're not in a full-on leadership position, if you're not at the top, it can be a struggle to get those ideas across. And I'm just going to say it to men who may not have that particular trait in them, right? To where they're humanizing the workers. They care about them. I have no doubt that there's some care there. But when you were talking earlier about, truly finding out how someone's doing, how does somebody who's not in a woman specifically, who's not in a leadership position, how do they convey that to the leadership that's in place without them trying to identify her as being touchy-feely or, it's just, you're being too mom-like, right? Because it's very condescending. It's very frustrating. And this is a valid and wonderful idea. But what would your encouragement be to them that aren't quite in that leadership position to be able to pull that trigger?
It's tough. I'm not going to lie. I think it takes risk and vulnerability because you are going to have to go into your emotions and share, especially when it's not natural for, men to even ask what's going on. And so I certainly applaud that, but that shouldn't prevent you from helping your manager, your leader, understand the dynamics of what you're coming from, because it's only going to make you a better worker. And that's really what this is about. So I think for women who are ambitious, it will be about their performance for sure. I mean, you have to perform to get ahead, but also sort of taking the risk of just helping one another, whether you're men or women, understand really where you're coming from and what matters to you, because then they can draw out the best in you.
Yeah. And I think with the mental health, the different things that we're seeing coming out of the pandemic with people's mental health being so important, I think people are realizing more that you have to humanize the worker, right? Or else you're going to lose the
Absolutely.
workers. So I think that maybe time and situations are on our side now, that those messages can be conveyed in a way that are received, if you will, by people that maybe didn't receive them 10 years ago. So,
right.
Yeah.
We're certainly more open to it.
Absolutely.
That's true.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. Nicole, I know that this is something that you're passionate about. If folks are listening to this, they want to reach out to you specifically. How do they do that? And then also, Laura, I'd like you to think about that as well. If somebody wants to connect with you, if you could answer right after her.
Great. Thanks, Eric. So yes, if someone would like to connect with me or someone at Private Vista, you can contact info@myprivatevista.com. Or you can go to our website, which is myprivatevista.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be a contact us button. And either of those ways, you'll be able to connect with me.
And Laura, how do they connect with you?
Probably the easiest is just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on there. And so I would be happy to connect with anyone interested in these topics and learning more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both again for your time and such a great podcast today. And our last thank you goes to the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Dollars and Cents podcast with Nicole Romito. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Nicole comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Private Vista, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Ramito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates.